It's now official. Hour number 2 is underway right here on the SportsGrid Network for the early line on a Tuesday morning edition. He's Joe Ranieri. I'm Donnie Rightside, and we're going to hit some news and notes around the NFL, and we are going to start in Detroit. I say maybe, he's top 3 tight end in the NFL this year, and he's a rookie. Sam Laporta for the Detroit Lions. They're saying now a, quote, outside shot, unquote, to play Sunday versus the Rams. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not a doctor. I don't have a medical degree, but I've been told that from other doctors that come on the network here who know more than me, Sam Laporta is not playing this weekend, Joe. Outside shot, what does that mean? Outside of Ford Field? Like, where is he playing this weekend? Because I don't think it's on the field.
He shouldn't have been playing at the second half of that game last week. So I don't know what to tell you there, Dan Campbell. Rah. Great. Congratulations. You won more games than you have in a million years. That's great. But now you just lost one of the best weapons you've had for Jared Goff, your quarterback there, and Laporta, who's a big part of that offense. And for no reason. I mean, you were never getting the number 2 seed. So you didn't better your position. So I don't know what the hell they were doing there. It made no sense to me. And I hope for Detroit backers fans, it doesn't come back and bite them. But something tells me that's going to be a pretty big loss.
You know, let's start here with that point as we welcome in the radio audience. You're watching and listening live here to the early line on the SportsGrid Network, Sirius XM Channel 159. He's Joe Ranieri. I'm Donnie Rightside. But let's get to this point because I always say this, and I mean it. Like, you can't bench everybody, and we all understand that. It's not college football. But, Joe, you can bench your top 15 guys. Like, you can do that here. Like, yes. Okay, Laporta, we have multiple tight ends. They can play. We have multiple wide receivers. We don't need to play our best 2. We don't have to play our quarterback. We don't have to play our best defensive ends, our best cornerbacks here. That's what I always laugh at because the coaches will stand up on that podium at the end of the game like, well, you have a game to play. We can't bench it. Yes, you can bench the important guys because you know what happens if your backup safety got hurt. Then you can stand up there, Joe, and tell me, hey, look, you can't bench everybody. Guys have to play here. We understand that. But if you lose your superstar tight end, which is so significant to your passing attack and what works here, to say like, well, you can't bench it. No, you could have benched Sam Laporta for that football game here. So I think me and Joe on the same side of this. If you don't need the game, don't play your most important players here. Now, playing your most important players and having your coaches ready. Pete Carroll, 73 years old. I'm not worn out. I'm not even tired. I'm coming back next year to Seattle. The ageless one, Pete Carroll, coming back to Seattle.
That's not shocking at all here. But, and his relationship with that organization, he's going to be another one of these guys where, I mean, look at his record, Donnie. Every year it's the same thing. We don't think they're going to win 6 games, 7 games. And what does he do? He's always heading into week 18, the final week of the season, with an opportunity to make the playoffs. And he does it with giant holes in the roster year after year. So I think he's a guy that he'll be there as long as he wants to be there. And could it happen soon? Maybe he wants to step down, but I think it'll be on his terms.
Absolutely. And again, he certainly earned that right here. And also, if your team was collapsing late, like they did basically on Bill Belichick and had a terrible season, then you start thinking differently. It wasn't a bad season. They almost made the playoffs. But again, you're looking forward to next year. We'll see what happens. I'll tell you, as an Eagles fan right here, I love this move. The New York Giants defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, has resigned from his position as defensive coordinator. Wasn't fired, but it was interesting all along. Didn't seem like he got along with Brian Daboll and that organization, despite saying, I don't have a ton of talent on my defense, but I do bring results here. And from an Eagles perspective for myself, every time we played the Giants, particularly this year, they were bringing heat from all over the place, and the Eagles couldn't figure it out. So I like Wink Martindale moving on from an Eagles perspective, but it is kind of interesting here where an organization is saying, like, look, once we even add to this defense, think what we can do with Wink Martindale, who was sensational so many years in that Baltimore Ravens defense. But sometimes you just don't have those personalities that mesh together, and apparently that must have been the case in New York here.
Yeah, and also, I mean, prior to this, we learned that the Giants dismissed 2 of his defensive assistants. And then we come to learn, of course, that he steps down, too. Both guys, in fact, were former Ravens, defensive guys as well with Wink Martindale. So he's only 60. He'll be unemployed for about 5 minutes here. Somebody will look to get him in, but I'm kind of with you. The rumors where there's smoke, there's fire. All year long, we heard there was a big riff in that room, and that's not great. And I think a lot of it had to do with your offense blows, and you're leaving my defense out here to dry. So I think a lot of that stemmed from that early on in the season.
No, certainly the case there. But, I mean, one of the bright spots was the Giants defense playing well down the stretch, or at least keeping their teams in those games. Now he's going to be on the move. And by the way, you always talk about, like, hey, a left-handed pitcher. If your kid's a lefty, just teach him how to throw a curveball. He'll have a 15-year, pro career because there's not many lefties. You be a good defensive coordinator, and you start out your early career around 25 years old, you can last into your 60s and 70s because that is a hot commodity here. And you're right. He's going to find a job within minutes once he starts to interview around. Let's take a look at some other coaching spots here. Here's the issue that always gets brought up in the NFL, Joe. If you are a great defensive coordinator, yes, you can be around the league, but everybody's always looking for the next great offensive coordinator or a great offensive coordinator to lead your team. He said, well, why would that be? There's 32 jobs here at offensive coordinator. Here's the issue with the Ravens. Todd Monken now is getting requests from the Chargers and the Panthers for a possible head coaching position. And if you are Harbaugh, you've been there a long time. You've done this many times. But whenever you have that great coordinator, Joe, you're going to lose him to another football team because how important the offensive spot is. Monken has been wonderful in Baltimore, bringing that offense into the new millennium, a MVP quarterback season here for Lamar Jackson. And now Monken might already be on the move for a head coaching spot next year here.
Well, and we'll see about that. Depends on what happens here, I think, with Baltimore moving forward. But don't forget, I mean, he wasn't originally a NFL guy. So, nope. You're going to start throwing these people into situations where, while they might have had success with one team, if you're still early on in the coaching career in the NFL ranks, yeah, I mean, what exactly do you think you're going to get? It didn't work in Arizona. How was that entire debacle there from Kingsbury, who I still think is on an island somewhere in far out land there? Yeah, so I would think that, we need to settle down here, especially with the head coach, because there's obviously a big difference between the head coach and the coordinator positions here. But there are going to be a few guys in big demand here coming up this offseason.
And our favorite thing here is the better the coach you are on the better team you are, the harder it is to get a head coaching job, because if you win the Super Bowl, most of those jobs will be taken away and you'll find yourself right back. And by the way, on that Cliff Kingsbury point, Joe, as you know, as a seasoned traveler, always buy a round trip ticket. Like, you might be stuck somewhere on an island where you just can't buy that return ticket back at any time. At this point here, the joke fly for days here at this point. Absolutely. Do you want to talk golf? Do you want to go to Hawaii? The early line goes there next. Stay tuned.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices. And we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
Right now, he's all a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division.
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby. The money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said, we're getting the Stanley Cup, so now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff,
your mind, Big 12, who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
San Francisco minus 120 to win the NFC Championship. It's the Cowboys with the second best number. The Eagles at 7-1.
What the hell's the difference between the 6th and the 7th seed? I need my guys healthy here to make a playoff push. They took the bye and still won the football game. You want to talk about two franchises going in the wrong direction? The Eagles. Ridiculous what they did this week.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Yeah, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
As I currently sit here in the Northeast, it is freezing cold, bad weather on the way. But the one thing you can do sometimes is click on your TV and have a nice little vacation getaway to Hawaii, because that's where the PGA Tour is lining up once again for this week. I'm Donnie Rightside. He's Joe Ranieri, and let's bring in Keith Stewart, our resident PGA expert right here on the SportsGrid Network. Keith, how are we feeling this week?
Boys, I tell you, the card was hot last weekend, just like Hawaii. Bring it on. Forget the rain. I am 5 hours behind on the Hawaiian time zone. Let's roll.
It's so nice. You get those nice Hawaiian vibes on the telecast here, Joe. You get to sit back. You get to relax. You say, man, this is going to get the golf game. Then you go like, yeah, we're still a couple months away from golf here in the Northeast. Now, Joe Ranieri certainly stationed out of South Florida. It's golf season all the way around. But let's keep it in the Northeast and have some fun here. But before we get out there was some big news around the golfing world just in the last 48 hours, and it usually surrounds Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods, synonymous with Nike for 20-plus years. Hundreds of millions of dollars paid out. Nike made billions on that transaction. Keith, talk to me here, though. Why the break from Nike and Tiger Woods?
Well, you know what? I think it's just one of those evolution type of things. Tiger's at a point in his career where I'm sure that Nike's not seeing the ROI on that investment that they have in years past. Even in the injury years, Tiger still, was moving the needle in the golf space. So as things move on, a couple cool things kind of came out as we've learned more and more about their relationship. Tiger still owns the copyright to that TW logo, that famous Nike co-branded logo that he has. And it seems like there's one of the other companies that he works with. The rumor mill is very strong around TaylorMade that they're going to come out with their own clothing line. You got to remember, they split with Adidas about 5 years ago when Adidas was purchased. So, I think that keep it simple, stupid. I think that all of these things that we're hearing about are definitely just lining up for there to be a little bit of shift. And let's be honest, guys. If Tiger brands anything, it's going to sell in golf. And now he could take ownership of it. Makes sense to me in 2024.
Yeah, it's all right. Don't worry about it. They've already signed Charlie, so we're not getting rid of the Woods family anytime soon. You know that, and I know that. I am sure that's what's coming up next year. But let's talk the Sony Open this week, because it's interesting, right? The first full field event, which still doesn't feel very full here, Keith. So any advantages to be looking at with guys that maybe haven't left that time zone here since we just had a tournament there last week?
Joe, I mean, you're always right on top of it, and you and I are in lockstep. 70% of the winners of the century, of the Sony over the last 20 years have played in the Century the week prior. So it's one of those places where if you're over in Hawaii, life is good. For sure, these guys are warmed up. They made a ton of birdies last week. They're going to need a ton of birdies right there at Wailea Country Club. They're going to skip over to the island of Oahu. They're going to play in Honolulu. They're very used to this island jumping this time of year. It's kind of a shame. I mean, the difference between the two golf courses makes them so unique. You have this wide open birdie fest over there at the Century at Kapalua. And then you come over to this tight palm tree lined fairways, lots of dog legs, lots of short par fours, scoring opportunities for these guys. They got to get to 20 under this week, but it's unique to me that the type of player is so much different between the two that seems to have a lot of success.
If we take a look here at that whole, because, they have the Florida swing, they play the West Coast here. Talk to me about the Hawaii swing and how they play and the differences in these golf courses compared to maybe on the mainland and maybe some of the advantages that some of these golfers have in this type of setting.
Well, the comp courses for a place like Wailea are certainly something like Harbor Town, something that's very tight. It's tree lined. That's the type of player we're looking for. This is an old Seth Rayner golf course, very classically designed back in 1929. The PGA Tour has been coming here since 1965. The guys that are here, 16 of the last 17 winners have played here before. It is the second most predictive course on the PGA Tour, second only to Augusta National Golf Club. So if you've been here before and you've played in the Century, I like your chances this week to show up on your card, my card, or anybody's card this week, because knowing the golf course and knowing those dog legs coming down the stretch, 4 of them move right to left in the last 5 holes. You've got to know exactly where to put this ball off the tee so you can attack and score and get to 20 under.
Who was the winner last year, Keith? And is it possible that we could go back to back here? Obviously, familiarity with these courses means a little something here for these guys. Would you be looking for anybody that finished top 2, top 3 last year?
Not necessarily. Siwoo Kim is the defending champion. He came in last year at plus 4,000 or 40-1, and he sits right around there on the board again this year. So I'm not looking for him to defend, but I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because if I was looking for anybody to win back-to-back, it would be Chris Kirk, because he's absolutely scintillating right now. And Kirk has a really good history at the Sony. He just won last week. He made 8,000 birdies in 4 days in order to win that thing. He had to shoot 8 under in the last day just to win by 1. True birdie fest out there in Kapalua. I think the way Kirk plays, very, very good ball striker, exceptional wedge player. Obviously, the putter's hot. If you're asking me for a back-to-back, I would be more likely to bet Kirk right in the 35 range than I would for Siwoo to go back-to-back years.
If we take a look at this tournament, Keith, too, because I always love the evolution of handicapping a season, are there guys that you pick out that you figure are going to play good right out of the jump? Are there some guys that say, you know what, I need a feel for this? Because let's just say my NFL handicapping or college football, I like to wait a week or two to let things settle in and say, okay, I understand what I'm getting here. Are there advantages for you early in the season or disadvantages that you deal with before we get into that, mainland, 50-state swing here for us?
Well, the last full field PGA Tour event was over at Sea Island in the RSM Classic. That's 7 weeks ago. So I think there's a lot of disadvantages here, Donnie, and I'm glad that you brought that up. If you didn't play in the Century, we have 33 guys coming in that have never even played this place before. It's a really tough handicapping situation, and we're talking about when it comes to picking winners, it's like splitting hairs amongst this field of 144. Just to get a good DFS lineup that's going to go into the weekend and get 6 to make the cut on a golf course where you really have to be on top of striking your ball and rolling the rock pretty good on Bermuda grass. So I think you're going to see a lot of lineups. You're going to see a lot of cards that favor the guys that played in the Century last week. You don't have to play exceptionally well there. You just have to prove that you've been hitting the ball very, very good. And a couple guys on my card were better than average at the Century. But you know what? I really like their chances going into this week because of their skill set.
All right, Keith, I'm a big believer if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So let's talk about the old guys. It's the Sony, right? So we're playing Matt Kuchar top 10, are we not? Or what are we doing here? Are we, if it ain't broke, don't fix it here, Keith. Give one for the old guys here.
Well, I'll tell you what, Matt Kuchar, he's had an extraordinary history there. He's won there before. But you know what? Matt Kuchar, he's kind of approaching that age. If he's kind of almost a poor man's Matt Kuchar at this point. If you want a rich man's Matt Kuchar, I would go with JT Poston. All right. They both live at Sea Island. They're both tall and thin. They both roll the rock like you wouldn't believe. And Poston has a legitimate chance to win this thing after the way he played last week at Century, finishing top 5. And I don't know. I mean, at some point, we got to let it go. We got to let Matt Kuchar go. We got to let Ches Reavie go. We got to let Rory Sabatini go. All those guys that always play good here. And we got to jump on some of these younger guys that can really stripe it down these fairways. So somebody like Poston, someone like Eric Cole that's playing well. They proved it at the Century last week. That's where I'm going.
Fantastic stuff as that golf swing starts up here. It's beautiful to see. Like, we're in early January. Me, again, being in the Northeast, freezing cold. It's nice to get those good vibes out here into Hawaii. Before you know it, the Masters will be right around the corner for us to have some fun with. Favorites in this golf tournament in the top 5, Ludwig Aberg, Tyrell Hatton, Matt Fitzpatrick, Brian Harman, and Russell Henley. Thank you to Keith Stewart, our resident PGA golf expert right here at the Sports Grid Network. Keith, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, boys, for one more week, aloha.
There we go. Ooh. Let's keep it hot in golf. He certainly will be a good friend here of the early line. Let's get back to the card. The NFL playoffs are upon us. We'll be right back.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, a Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
favorite. I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
it. I'll take a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
San Francisco minus 120 to win the NFC Championship. It's the Cowboys with the second best number. The Eagles at 7-1.
What the hell's the difference between the 6th and the 7th seed? I need my guys healthy here to make a playoff push. They took the bye and still won the football game. You want to talk about two franchises going in the wrong direction? The Eagles. Ridiculous what they did this week.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Did you shed a tear last night? Were you sad that your football season was over? The NCAA ended with a Michigan Wolverines national championship, but now it's time for the professionals. And by the way, when I say professionals, I guess it's not really what it used to be in the past, because the college kids are getting paid a good amount of money, most of them, to play. I guess they're professionals as well. But on we go, Joe Ranieri, to the wild card round. We got a doubleheader on Saturday, a tripleheader on Sunday, and a Monday night football game between Philadelphia and Tampa Bay. I can't wait to get it started. But in this segment, Joe, you know where the focus is going to be? On the NFC. So let's have some fun with this. The first NFC game of the weekend is going to be on Sunday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. That's live from Dallas, AT&T Stadium. It's Green Bay, it's Dallas, it's Jordan Love, it's Dak Prescott, and we got a line over a touchdown, currently sitting at the FanDuel Sportsbook, -7.5. And by the way, Joe, that's up from a touchdown opener line at the FanDuel Sportsbook. A total opened up at 49. We now see 50.5. Let's get the good vibes going for the weekend here in the NFL. What are you seeing here early in the week, and which way would you be leaning here between Green Bay and Dallas?
Well, it was one of the games that I looked at right away, Donnie, and immediately went to the total and bet the over. And here's why. If you haven't been paying attention, and it's amazing how little, props that Jordan Love gets, it cracks me up. We're all still treating this guy like he's some sort of backup to Aaron Rodgers here, and yet he is the future of this organization here. Since Thanksgiving, 6 multi-touchdown games without a pick, right? Tied for second in the NFL this year with a passer rating above 100 here. Since week 8, completion percentage has led the National Football League. They have won 7 of the 10 games here during that stretch here. This is a offense right now that is humming along, and we all know Dallas at home, certainly against the Packers defense, although I think we'll be better here. They are certainly going to be able to put their own points up. So I don't see how this doesn't. I'm expecting a very tight game, but I'm also expecting one where we're going to get some points here, Donnie. I think it's going to be one of those who's got the ball last is going to win it. And I do think we're going to get into the 50s in this game.
Offense has been very good down the stretch for the Packers. And you are right about your point, Joe, bringing up. Like, we know Green Bay is a good football team, but throughout the marching points of the season, you could have sold me that, like, a Daniel Jones-esque performance this season out of your starting quarterback in Green Bay, which we know Jordan Love has not been the case. He's been very effective. And it's not as if you're saying, like, well, he better be effective. Look at his top 5 wide receivers. They're unbelievable. No, they're not. They're rookies. They're injured. Who knows who's even in his backfield on a game-to-game basis. So if you can get a full complement of wide receivers, which includes Christian Watson coming back this weekend, and you get A.J. Dillon, another week removed from that thumb injury, and you saw, look, Aaron Jones is a very good running back when healthy. He's healthy now. He's been tremendous down the stretch. So we're not going to look past it. Let me just ask you one question about this game. Is anything creep into your mind to say, it's the Dallas Cowboys, it's the playoffs. We know how good they can be in the regular season when the pressure's not ratcheted up. But it's been a long time which we felt comfortable with the Dallas Cowboys football team entering into the postseason. And by the way, they're not a 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. They're a number 2 seed. Could the pressure creep into this game for Dak Prescott as the quarterback?
So the Cowboys defense this year, they played 9 games, Donnie, this year with quarterbacks who finished with passer ratings above 90. They were 3-6 against the number in those games. You're asking the Cowboys just to win, but we're not. Yep. We're asking the Cowboys to cover, and I have no desire to run to the window and lay more than a touchdown with a team that, against the better competition and the better quarterbacks, has fallen a little short. Yeah, no, it would only be Packers for me.
Yeah, well, it's good. I'm interested to see how this plays out, but I think I'm with you. Sometimes in the playoffs, you get a little bit different of a, what's the word I'm looking for, a game flow per se at this point, but you still should be able to get yards. And also, one game is going to be played this weekend, which we'll get to next in a little bit for like Kansas City and freezing cold temperatures. You're in a dome here. These two teams should be able to get after it, and I'm looking forward to that here as it plays out. Now, in this game, as we talk about Green Bay and Dallas, hey, Mike McCarthy looks to coach in Green Bay, a little bit of a rivalry. How's that play into it? Let's get to the next game. Oh, yeah, Matthew Stafford. Yeah, he's got a little bit of a mojo here with the city of Detroit as he's returning home and they hope it's not going to be as a conquering hero taking on Detroit, who's not used to being in the playoffs and having a playoff home game. I do think the line was a little bit disrespectful, opening up in that 3 range. Now sits at 3.5. But here's the interesting caveat. I loved what the Rams did last week, Joe. They said to themselves, 6 or 7, it's all the same. Let's get my veteran team a bye week here, get nobody injured as we go into Detroit. Detroit said, we got a football game to play. I'm an old school football coach. We're going to win every football game. And you played in a game where you probably shouldn't have played your starters. I'm not even talking about the injury, Joe. I'm just talking about wear and tear on your offensive line, your defensive line, your wide receivers, your running backs here. Is that going to play a difference here? And also, can the Rams pull the upset in Detroit?
Oh, absolutely. If you don't think so, you haven't been paying attention here. Not only is it a homecoming for Stafford, right, to go back to Detroit, but it's Goff going up against the team that drafted him as well, his old team there with the Rams. So this is just amazing storylines here. But my question is, who are we trusting to game plan this game, this matchup here? McVay or Dan Campbell? Because ultimately that's what this is going to come down to in the playoffs. One guy's got a Super Bowl ring, been there and done this, and one guy doesn't. And we also have a situation where the Rams have won 7 of 8 games since their bye. The only loss they had, Donnie, was on the road in terrible conditions against the Ravens, who everyone has pegged as the favorite. Okay, they still dropped 30 points in that game against that defense in overtime. This is an offense with a head coach that is built for the conditions in Detroit that they're going into here. And I don't know. The Rams, everyone made fun of their defense to start the year. I'm not making fun of their defense, and they've been way more consistent down the stretch than Detroit. It's another game I think we're going to get a ton of points. But I would not be shocked if the Rams win this game outright. And if you're going to give me more than a field goal, I'll take it.
Every year before the season starts, Joe, there's usually a teams that like you're high on or you're lower on, and sometimes you get those wrong. And this year it was. I looked at the Rams coming into the season. I said Stafford might be gone midseason. Aaron Donald, does he want to finish career trying to chase a Super Bowl in another city? And they're going to blow this thing up, and then McVay goes into the, booth to call games or just heads off into the sunset, just had a kid and I want some family time. They've been great here. And this is one of those it's a wild card weekend. The Rams are a true wild card here. You don't want to give them momentum, but again, they played it exactly perfect last week. They even got a win out of it here. The backups were excited. They played. They beat the backups for the 49ers. Nobody else was injured, and away they go. Which brings me to the Monday Night Football game where I saw my Philadelphia Eagles in a meaningless situation have a thought process of saying, you know what? I know these guys are human beings, and I know they really don't want to play, but I'm going to try to get them to play this weekend in a meaningless game against the Giants. They not only played terribly, they were embarrassing, and they got injured. But happy for them, they played Tampa Bay, who's an underdog to the Philadelphia Eagles this weekend on Monday Night Football in Tampa Bay. The line opened up at 2.5. It's still sticking there at 2.5. A total of 44. I don't know if Jalen Hurts is going to play. I don't know if Jalen Hurts can throw the ball more than 20 times or 20 yards downfield, which injuring his throwing hand during that football game. A.J. Brown left that game. Who knows if he's playing? Devonta Smith didn't play in the game because he was injured the week before. And DeAndre Swift, thank goodness, had an illness, so he didn't get injured in the game last week. It's wild to see the Eagles as a favorite, but I got to tell you, Joe, I actually agree with it because I don't know what I'm getting out of Tampa Bay this weekend here, and I don't know what I'm getting out of the Eagles, but I do think that line is correct, though, to be honest.
It may very well be, but there is the whole point of betting football is to try to avoid variance, right? Try to avoid it as best as possible, limit it. What you just said here on both sides of the ball, I don't know who the hell's playing. I have no idea who's going to be playing, who's going to be available, and whether or not it will matter. I mean, I'll say this. I mean, the Tampa defense is the reason they're here. So the defense, I think, for the most part, will certainly keep this game close enough to make Eagle fans sweat and Eagle backers sweat. But I would only look at the total in this game here because if the injuries are what we think they are and what they have on both sides of the ball, then the defenses on both sides will probably rule it and rule this game. So it was 44 and a half. Yes, I get it. It's in Tampa, but I would only look at the under and expect either of these two teams just want to win and get the hell out of there and move on and hopefully get enough people healthy. This is a tough one here, Donnie, with your Eagles.
Yeah, again, last week Tampa Bay won, but it still felt like a loss. 6-0 late in that football game against a hapless Carolina Panthers team. They did what they had to do. They won. They actually even covered, which you love if you bet that side. But this is one of those games where they put on Monday night like, people watch it anyway. Why? Because it's the playoffs and it's Monday night, so why not go ahead with it? But if we do take a look at the NFC right now, the championship winner at the FanDuel Sportsbook, of course, it's the San Francisco 49ers at a 130 price. But if we look down that card here, 31-1 here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 21-1 for the Rams. Then the Lions sit at plus 950. How about those Packers, Joe? 39-1. Outside of the Niners, who should be getting your money here?
Oh, I do think the Rams are alive here. If you're looking for somebody on that side of the board, they are without a doubt a very scary proposition, not just for Detroit, but for the NFC and obviously the 49ers, who they play twice a year, so they know them. So I think it starts, if you're looking for a dog, with that Detroit game coming up this weekend. If they make it past that, should be interesting.
Oh, we're going to get an upset or two this weekend, specifically out of the NFC. But you know what? The AFC takes full control on Saturday with back-to-back games and maybe in sub-Arctic temperatures. The AFC wildcard playoffs. Let's get a preview next. Joe and Donnie in the morning right here on a Tuesday.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices. We're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
Right now, he's all a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
favorite. I don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby. The money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cup, so now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
San Francisco minus 120 to win the NFC Championship. It's the Cowboys with the second best number. The Eagles at 7-1.
What the hell's the difference between the 6th and the 7th seed? I need my guys healthier to make a playoff push. They took the bye week and still won the football game. You want to talk about two franchises going in the wrong direction? The Eagles. Ridiculous what they did this week.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
Yeah, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
I'm excited already. Playoff football in the NFL, absolutely sensational stuff. He's Joe Ranieri. I'm Donnie Rightside. We are the crew on the early line for this Tuesday morning right here on the SportsGrid Network, Sirius XM channel 159. But the AFC, Joe, takes full and center stage on Saturday, 4:30 kickoff and 8 p.m. kickoff. And I always get a kick out of this. When Houston makes the playoffs, they don't get a choice. They know they're not going to be Monday night. They know they're not going to be Saturday night. They know they're not going to be standalone on Sunday afternoon at 4:30 in that all-important dynamic. They always get the first game of the playoff here, and they will again. The Cleveland Browns and the Houston Texans, resurgent Joe Flacco back into the playoffs here. Can he make a run similar to what we saw with the Baltimore Ravens a decade ago? And C.J. Stroud, we've never seen a run from him. Why? Because he's a rookie but performing at an MVP level. This line opened it up at a minus 1.5 point favorite towards Cleveland to start here at the FanDuel Sportsbook. Joe, we're now seeing 2.5s here, and other outlets even up to 3s as a road favorite. The total sits at 44.5. Can we continue to trust this rookie phenom in C.J. Stroud, or are we just saying, I love the defense on Cleveland, Flacco's been there, done that, this offense looks great, and I'm taking those Browns? What gives you, Joe?
This is a tough one because I believe it was week 16 that these two teams went at it. But the big difference was no C.J. Stroud in that game. So they, the Cleveland team has not had a chance to go up against this kid who, let's face it, and there were a lot of other, I believe, there are a lot of playmakers of his that aren't going to be available in this one as well. But like we saw with them against Indy, this is a team that you have to worry about because C.J. Stroud has done the unthinkable this year. He's won games he had no business winning. But quite honestly, Donnie, so has Cleveland. Cleveland has won more games that they had no business winning, where you've got to rip Joe Flacco off the couch and bring him in at this particular point. And it's a great story. I mean, kudos. But ultimately, the regression is going to hit one of these teams. I think the question is, who do we think, has used up their 9 lives here? Is it Cleveland to this point with Joe Flacco, or is it Houston with Stroud? I would bet Cleveland now at 2.5 because I don't see this number getting any better. In fact, I only see it moving towards Cleveland at 3. So if 2.5s are available, bet it now because I don't see it going towards the Texans by the time we kick off.
I'm with you in this one, too, and sometimes you could take a little bit of a look at the college football playoff, right? Championship game. Is that, Donnie, why do you initially like Michigan? Well, I just think their defense is better than Washington. That's something you can hang your hat on. And again, we weren't talking about, Joe, like last night, 4.5 point line. It wasn't 14.5, and neither it is in this. Cleveland has a really good defense. And another thing I like, which I can't get enough of here, we just talked about like what the Rams did as opposed to what the Eagles and the Lions did. The Cleveland Browns got crushed last week. What, is their morale down because they lost to their in-state rival Cincinnati? No, it was a bye week for them. They're rested, healthy, and ready. And also, you weren't game planning last week as a Cleveland Browns organization for Cincinnati. You knew the options in the playoffs and where you were going. So you were either taking a look at one of two teams, either Indianapolis or Houston. They're going to be ready for this football game, and that's an extra bonus and an advantage here. So I do like Cleveland early in the week. And again, based on defensive tendencies, obviously Cleveland is better than Houston. Let's get to the nightcap here. 143, 144 on the rotation. That is Miami. That is Kansas City. And boy, what a past 2 weeks that's been here for Miami. Looking at, hey, maybe we could take down the number 1 overall seed. All right, we didn't get that. Let's get the number 2 overall seed. Oops, we didn't get that either. Down you go and on the road to Kansas City. This line opened up as a minus 1.5 point favorite at the FanDuel Sportsbook in the favor of the Chiefs. We're now seeing 3.5s at the FanDuel Sportsbook and a total of 44. Who knows who's going to play for Miami this week? Obviously, we'll be checking day to day here on those practice reports with Raheem Mostert, with Tyreek Hill, with Waddle on the outside. But more importantly, Joe, South Florida loves warm weather. That's an advantage for Miami at home all season long. We're looking at temperatures below 10 degrees midway through that game. Wind chills should be around 0. A frosty night at Arrowhead for us here in this AFC tilt.
Yeah, sounds like wonderful conditions. This is also another impossible one because I don't know 2 teams that I trust less than Miami and Kansas City. Yeah. We can't keep talking about Kansas City in terms of what they were with Andy Reid and Mahomes. And that's not the same. This is nowhere near those championship teams over the last couple of years. And Miami, how many more games do we have to see them go up against better competition and not be able to get the job done? Not to mention all their linebackers are out now. Baker is now gone for him, right? Van Kinkel, he's gone. He's not going to be. They are so banged up on the defensive side now. The only good news is it's going to be, suboptimal. We're talking about temperatures with wind chill at 2 degrees. It's going to make catching the ball much more difficult anyway. So the good news for Miami is that it's going to be your running game against Kansas City's running game. Ultimately, what's going to happen here. I do think the Dolphins have a decent shot here of getting it done, but I would not be shocked, Donnie, at all. I know everyone ran to the window to bet the under. I don't know that I'd be betting the under here. I think in these kinds of conditions, short fields happen. Special teams screw up and give teams short fields. I think we might be looking at maybe a few more points in this game than people think.
It's a good point you bring up, too, because we're saying, hey, Miami's a warm weather team. That's going to be cold. That's going to affect them. They're a high wire offense. But they're not really that right now. They're too banged up at wide receiver to do that high wire act where you would love to be in a dome somewhere. So it's actually kind of interesting. You get that 3.5 points and you say to yourself, and again, Kansas City is certainly no high wire act like they've been the past 3 to 4 years on offense. But if you tell me right now, Joe, I get a healthy Achane and I get a healthy Mostert for this game, you let the chips fall where they may, because again, as I'm going back to both of these teams, let's just say healthy Miami and the Chiefs of last year. What's that total in nice conditions? 54, 55.5, even for a playoff game? They would really get after it. So maybe this is a blessing in disguise for the Miami Dolphins, but certainly will be fun to see that play out and keep an eye on those weather conditions and practice reports. The closer we get to game time, that might spell a certain way to go. Let's flip it over to Sunday, 1 p.m. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who got in after beating the backups for the Ravens, and the Jacksonville Jaguars with the collapse. They find themselves without T.J. Watt this weekend, but also going up against the Buffalo Bills with a lot of momentum, clinching the number 2 overall seed. This line, Joe, FanDuel opened up at -7.5. We now sit at double digits. That's a 10-point number and a total that sits at 35.5. It looks like it opened up at 43 at this point. I'm just trying to get a quick weather update if I can get it here. Let me see here. It's not showing up on my screen, but I don't know. Oh, there we go. Here we go, Joe. Ready? 21 degrees.
It's terrible.
22 mile-an-hour winds. Oh, my goodness.
Terrible.
Here. We're going to lay 10. Yep. Joe, you laying 10 in those conditions with the Steelers against them? My goodness.
I do not, but I don't want anything to do with the Steelers either in this spot here. And again, it was one of the games where as soon as that Miami Buffalo game ended there, I was waiting to see what the total was going to be because we knew we had a pretty good idea of what that weather was going to be next week, and it wasn't going to be pretty. So, we saw it at 43, 42.5, and it's been bet all the way down now, Donnie, to 35. And that still might be way too high here. Now, keep an eye on the report because obviously with weather like situations like this, while it won't be sunny and 60 degrees, as long as the wind, these are two teams that the weather is not going to bother them. They're both built to win in these kinds of conditions, right? So keep an eye on the wind. If it's not as dramatic as they're making it out to seem, then we might get a few more points and we might see some buyback on that total. But I'm not running to the window to lay 10 because I think this is either going to be a field goal game or it's going to be a blowout. It's too tough to tell. But I don't know can I trust Mason Rudolph for all the marbles here in Orchard Park against that defense? And no Watt, by the way.
Yeah, that's going to hurt them there, no doubt about it. But that's fun because I saw that. I said, wait a second, what is that opening line doing so far below? But anytime you get those windy conditions. Yep. But, Joe, if you were in a lab and said, hey, you know what, it's going to be freezing cold this weekend. Winds are going to be around 25 miles an hour, maybe gusting to 30. Print me out a quarterback in 3D that I can use this weekend. It would be Josh Allen. That's the perfect quarterback here. Yes. 50 miles, it doesn't matter. He can throw right through that wind. This should be a good one here, but added extra intrigue and a huge line out here for the Buffalo Bills in those conditions. But let's take a look here at the FanDuel Sportsbook and go over the AFC Conference odds. Obviously, the number one seed here, the Baltimore Ravens, not playing this weekend at a plus 125 price. The Buffalo Bills, the number 2 seed, coming in at a plus 280. Kansas City, Miami, Cleveland, Houston, and Pittsburgh behind them. The longest of those is the Pittsburgh Steelers at 60-1. Let's just take the Ravens again out of the equation. Who is getting your money here in the AFC that you think can do some damage at a good price and make you some money, Joe?
Well, it's got to be somebody from that side, right? So obviously the Ravens, they are the favorite number 1 seed. It's usually always a number 1 seed that eventually makes it to the big game, Donnie, out in Vegas there. But if you had bet the Bills prior to the Dolphin game because you thought they'd have a good shot at getting that 2 seed, you missed a pretty good number there. But there is no faith on anybody on that second column that I got when it comes to the Steelers or Houston or the Browns. I think it's going to come down to number 1 versus number 2. That is Baltimore versus Buffalo. I think ultimately that's what the AFC Championship is going to be about. Build some of those future bets around who you think is going to win it. AFC, there's always those prop bets, Sonny, where what division does the AFC winner come from? Yeah, AFC East or AFC North. Pick your poison here. There's a lot of different ways to build future bets around that, but I do think ultimately it becomes very chalky in the AFC.
Let me ask you this question, too, because it's sometimes just ingrained into our mind. You say to yourself, it's usually always Kansas City in the AFC. It's always them at home. It's always them in the AFC Championship game. The road is going to be harder this year, but it's still Andy Reid. It's still Patrick Mahomes. It's a plus 490 price, and I know people will buy into that. Are you one of those that would buy into it, or you say, you know what, I need to see him against the Dolphins? Or if you put that money down, you say to yourself, because we've all done this, why did I bet the Chiefs? Like, this isn't, 2016, 17, or 18. This team has an issue here. But are you maybe of the mindset that maybe the Chiefs can get that lightning in a bottle back here, Joe?
Yeah, No, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen at all, because the big difference here is it's not running through Arrowhead. The road to through the AFC is not going through Arrowhead. You got one game there, and you're taking on a Miami team that, in the conditions that pretty much level the playing field here a lot. There's no way I see Kansas City going on the road at some point here to have to win. If it was an Arrowhead and we knew it would be an Arrowhead, we might have a different discussion, but I just don't trust this team right now to be able to do anything other than maybe be one and done or possibly second round gone.
If there's 2 guys with pressure in this playoff run, it's number 1, it's Dak Prescott, and maybe close behind, maybe even in first, it's the Baltimore Ravens MVP quarterback, Lamar Jackson. There are no excuses for him not to get to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Home field advantage, best team in football. Let's see how it plays out. But we're looking for an unbelievable setup to Wild Card Weekend, and we got you covered here. So let's take a look at Michael Penix. What is going to happen with his NFL future? Find out next.
Fun to do because you could kind of, place a season-long bet all at once and just wait it out. I've always found that interesting. But New York is one state where it's a little bit unclear.
You cannot bet on basically anything that requires a vote. So you're talking about an MVP award, a Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, anything where people at the end of the year have to vote.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices. And we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now he's all a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby. The money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cup, so now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take a little
it.
piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
San Francisco minus 120 to win the NFC Championship. It's the Cowboys with the second best number. The Eagles at 7-1.
What the hell's the difference between the 6th and the 7th seed? I need my guys healthy here to make a playoff push. They took the bye week and still won the football game. You want to talk about two franchises going in the wrong direction? The Eagles. Ridiculous what they did this week.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Yeah, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Right back at here at the SportsGrid Network. It's the Early Line. Quick little segment before we head into hour number 3, and we'll keep the good vibes going. A lot of great content coming up, so make sure you stay tuned. I'm Donnie Rightside. He's Joe Ranieri. But you know what we're going to talk next here? As we go to the SportsGrid Network, each and every day on the Early Line, Joe, as you know, we put out a poll, and we want to see if we can fade the public or what the public actually thinks. And fresh off of the national championship game last night, we have a poll up, and it's about a quarterback. It's not J.J. McCarthy. It's Michael Penix Jr. For the majority of the season, very, very good football team, very good quarterback in the Heisman Trophy race contention, which leads us to believe, Joe, he would be a very good quarterback here in the NFL. Now, the poll we put up, how good will Michael Penix Jr. be in the NFL? Now, there are 4 options: backup, starter, all-pro, or MVP. So I don't know if you saw these statistics coming up, which you're going to post here in just a few moments. But I sort of got a little bit of a chuckle because most of the times you see a player and people go, man, probably going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Yeah, he's probably going to win an MVP. This is going in the opposite direction, Joe. Backup in the clubhouse at 51% here, which means they don't even think if he's drafted in the first round, he can be a starter in the NFL. What gives here, Joe?
Well, I don't know for sure, but I would venture to say that the majority of people who voted on that poll had Washington tickets last night. I'm just thinking they might have had a bet or two on Washington last night, and now that Washington didn't get it done, apparently he's no better than a backup quarterback in the NFL here. So the injury concerns are going to scare a lot of teams, no doubt. But because it's a precious commodity, anybody that could play quarterback, and we learned that again this year. So he is going to have a shot to play in the NFL for sure. You know this, Donnie. It all depends on who drafts him.
It really does. And by the way, like the injury concerns, like he's had some major knee injuries and problems in the past. But we'll talk about this a lot more because there are some question marks here. Join us for hour number 3 on the Early Line. Coming up next.